Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be back with you, and I'm really pleased to say that I've been able to get hold of my dear friend Setareh Sadeqi in Iran to talk about the recent events there. Um, and I know it's a little bit difficult for you to still to get online and hold the line. So let's hope we can manage to keep going through the talk, because I think it's incredibly important to hear from people inside Iran. Of course, there's a huge deluge of misinformation, whether it's kind of pro the resistance or against the resistance. There's just a huge amount of disinformation online. And I think it's very hard, and it's getting harder with the arrival of AI and so on, to actually hone down the information and to get to the reality on the ground. And you are always someone that can do that very eloquently, and from a very informed, objective perspective. So I'm really happy that you could join me today. Welcome.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's great to see you and to talk to you. It's been a long time, and yes, after 2 weeks of total blackouts,
Yeah.
I did not have any access to the internet. Even the national internet was not really working for the first few days. There was no way to get information or contact friends and family members outside
Yeah.
Iran. But I should say once I got back on the internet and like struggling with the VPN and opening Twitter and social media, I was like, it was good that I had a break from this
Yeah.
cesspool, I would say, because as you said, it's become very difficult. The fine line between reality and fake news in cyberspace is just becoming thinner and thinner. It's becoming more difficult to uh, to see what's right, what's not, what's true, and what is not. And because of the speed of the information and the input that we're
Yeah.
just bombarded with, at some point you think, what's the point? I can't really do anything, and like back in, I think, 2022,
Mm.
when there were protests in Iran, and we tried to find some of the most shocking fake news that were spreading about Iran. And this time, it's like, it's just too much, and it's happening so fast, and especially with the internet that I have been having access to here, it's become difficult. And um, yeah, but still, we'll just do what we can. We'll speak the truth. Hopefully, people who are actually looking for the truth will find it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to actually ask you because of your personal experience. I was actually in touch with someone close to you who realized he couldn't contact you anymore, our mutual dear friend.
Yeah.
Um, and that must have been incredibly hard. Like, what was the feeling for you with everything that was going on at that moment to suddenly lose that link to the outside world? How did you feel?
It was very scary. It was very difficult, especially that, being in Iran and being cut off from the world. Yes, you miss the news or what's actually happening or what's the world is saying about Iran. But for those outside Iran, especially your loved ones, if they want to, I mean, they get really worried because the news that was going out of Iran was very, very scary. And if you don't have any source of, alternative information to get, or you cannot
Mm.
contact your loved ones inside Iran, it gets really scary, especially if it's continues for a while. So um, I mean, those who know about the history of the propaganda against Iran kind of know that probably what they're hearing is not true, but at the end of the day, it's scary,
Yeah.
especially We have seen what happened to Syria. We have seen what's happened to, I mean, Iraq, Libya. And so there's always this scenario that this time it might happen to Iran too. We might experience the same thing. And if that happens, you don't know who's going to, get control of the cities and towns. The experience
Mm,
that um, people in the region and other countries have had with the imperialist powers taking over in the name of saving them has been very, very bitter. And we don't want that to happen to us, no matter what we're dealing inside the country. We always know that the imperialist substitute for that, it's definitely a much worse scenario.
yeah.
And that's something that's like your friends, loved ones from outside really worry about. Um,
Mm,
we have we have tested our resistance. We have always come out of it, but it's very painful and it has an impact on the society. Sometimes at some point it becomes very not only traumatizing but also like very exhausting. I've
yeah.
heard this from a lot of Iranians. Why don't they just leave us alone? Let us live the life that we have. It's
Mm,
never going to happen. We know it's never going to happen. We're not going to get a break from any of the various sorts of aggressions. Sometimes it's sanctions, it's assassinations, it's terrorist groups being armed, it's hijacking protests and turning them
mm,
into killing sprees, like what we have seen. Sometimes it's direct actions, like what we saw in the 12-day war.
yeah.
But we never get a break from
The
all
pressure.
those aggression, yeah, and oppression.
Yeah, and it's an endless pressure. And when you talk about, the Western project doesn't mean better things for the people of the country that is being targeted. I mean, Syria is the perfect example, which is now overrun by Wahhabi Takfiri fanatics who are murdering literally not only ethnic minorities. I mean, the massacres of the Kurds now, those are predominantly Sunni.
Right.
So it's
Yes.
irrelevant, all of the narratives that the West is pushing to foment any kind of regime change or destabilization from within are such heinous misrepresentations of reality. And I guess I want to talk to you about that because I've actually been reading some very interesting reports on the actual labor movement in Iran. So the movement to try and address the issues with the economy and potentially the inequality in some areas. And I wanted you to talk about how the security forces were dealing with what was a genuine, if you like, movement that then was hijacked by the rioters, basically being controlled from outside. Because, people don't understand this nuance. They don't understand, they just see the narratives that are being pushed externally.
Yeah, as you said, the working class protests started a while ago, and especially in certain areas of the country, and where there were big government organizations was a high number of workers, and it was not covered on international news at all, of course. And then later on, towards the end of the December, there was also another class of the society that started protesting, which were those active in precious metal and currency markets. Um, and the protests were going on for almost 2 weeks, or maybe 10 days, 11 days before it became
Mm,
an international headline. There were scenes of the police officers walking on the two sides of the streets, protecting the protesters,
mm,
or in the bazaar. Sometimes they were not even present because the bazaris, as they call, and they have always been a big part of economic protest in the country back before the 1979 Popular Revolution, and
Mm,
after that, they have played a significant role. So people were out. I remember going to the beautiful bazaar in Isfahan, and
mm.
shopkeepers trying to sell products, and they were saying like, we're going to close down at 2 p.m. So if you want to buy anything, just come now. And I was like, why? And is that part of the strike? Because I had heard about the strikes, and they were like, yes, it's part of the strike. So that was the way they had chosen to um, make their demands to the government and show that they are against the economic policies and reforms that the government was implementing. So it was going on like in my neighborhood in different parts of the city. Shops would close down at a certain time. Some days they would not even work at all. Or I remember wanting to walk into like a clothing store because the lights were on, and they just from the window they with their hands they showed me that they're not working, which was again another form of protesting and by being on a strike against economic policies. But then there is this famous clown prince, Pahlavi, who is the son of the ousted Shah of Iran. He has been living on the money he had stolen or his father stole from the Iranian nation. In the U.S., he has said in his interviews that he has not done any jobs. He has been just living on that money. And of course, the way he said that was that if I wanted to work, then I couldn't have any political activities for Iran. So that's how he justifies that. Politicians inside the United States have come to realize that he does not really have a popularity inside Iran. He does not know how to run a country. He's famously known for having failed to manage his own family. I don't want to get into the details of his personal life because
Mm-mm.
I don't think that matters. What matters is that he's not popular in Iran. Um, but there is a part, I mean, the protests were going on for 10, 11 days, and people were on the streets. I've talked to protesters on January 8th, if I'm not mistaken, because I think in the
Yeah.
Persian calendar more than the international
Yeah.
calendar. I think it was January 8th. Um, I talked to a few of the protesters from, friends that wanted to be a part of it. And I said, okay, are you out because he had called for on the people to go and protest? And they were like, no, we've been on the streets for 10 days and we just want to keep continuing protesting. And during those days, in many cases, there were not even police officers on the streets. It was
Mm,
just, just a peaceful protest and strike. Um, but then, but then it was hijacked, and then there were very violent elements within the protests. From that night, after 10 days of peaceful protests, banks were
mm,
started to be like put on fire. Bus stations, like in my neighborhood, the street where I live in Isfahan, all the bus stations, there's like a fast bus service, and all the stations were knocked down. Like the next day, there was like nothing left of those bus stations from the fences that they had, from the glass, like the stations was like the partitions, the glass partitions that they have, everything it was like smashed and there was nothing left. Banks were like put on fire. You could hear, I mean, the nights before from that night, you could hear people chanting slogans on the streets. But um, the nights before, there was no shooting. I did not hear any shooting or like loud noises. But from January 8th, it started getting very violent. And that's the night when, like, I think towards 8 or 9 p.m., the internet was cut off. Even mobile
mm.
phones were cut off for a few hours. And then international calls were also cut off. And that was the government's way of managing
Yeah.
um, how these violent elements were communicating with each other. Of course, a lot of them
Mm.
had access to Starlink, but some like other elements were using the international internet and phones and like even sending text was disabled for a while. So you couldn't communicate with anyone, and there were just news coming that they have burned this place and that place, and their shootings have been heard here and there. This 8-year-old girl that was shot to death when she
Mm.
was in the car with her family. That was almost, I mean, it's the neighborhood that where I live in Esfahan, and she died in that on that date, on that night. And I mean, a lot of the people didn't even know that protests were happening because it was quiet. And if you're not following the news, you're not someone who
Yeah.
always like keeps updated with the news, then you would just hear that from people. And by the time you hear it, you're maybe on the street trying to get somewhere. And I know people who just didn't know that something was happening on the streets, and they were just going to the supermarket, and then they got caught in this violent thankfully the ones that I knew survived, nothing bad happened to them, but a lot of people died like that, and just random shooters. And that's always a
Mm.
tactic to increase the number of the people who get killed,
Yeah.
and also, of course, fabricate numbers in order
Mm.
to justify the public opinion, the global public opinion, for a military invasion. And this is a very well worn out playbook by the imperialist powers.
Yeah.
It's very boring. I wish they were at least a little bit creative. It's very boring, right? So,
Yeah.
um, and within I mean, most of the people who died on that Thursday and Friday after the
Mm.
um the so-called opposition figure in Washington called the people to take on the streets. And he and some celebrities, some like famous people on social media asked people to attack the police, to take over the institutions and infrastructure. And what I mean, people know that's not going to help the economic situation.
Yeah.
Protesters won't do that. I understand that sometimes people are angry. They might, I don't know, break something, or,
Mm.
you
Mm.
know, but attacking a police station, in which country
Mm.
uh, would that not lead to a high number of dead people? And in
Exactly.
fact, I think, I mean, the police were advised to restrain and like refrain from using live ammunition for, and that's why we have a lot of police officers and security forces killed. And they were not only killed, like they were shot when they were protecting the police station. Like, so the people who were trying to storm the police stations were armed. And then after that, there are really graphic images. And Vanessa, it's been very depressing. I'm trying not to look at the pictures, but
Yeah.
um, I don't remember having seen such violence and like killing spree in cold blood in Iran. And I have a student who works at a hospital, and he was telling me on Wednesday they had Cowhees, and he could barely speak. He said that he's been um, he could still smell blood from all the hours that he spent in the hospital treating wounded people, and that they were stabbed, and like some of them, like the attackers like twist the knife inside the body, like poking out parts. It's very graphic, it's very violent. And he was
Mm.
like, I don't know if Iran, I mean, I can't believe that Iranians can do this to their own you know like
People.
fellow Iranians.
Uh,
It's just impossible. It's very strange. And I think, I don't know how that's possible. Part of it because there are videos of these attackers using drugs before starting their attack, because I
mm.
don't think a normal person can do that. And there is also, I mean, this is also something that has happened before in other countries. Mm, so yeah, the pictures are very violent. They have killed police officers or besieged forces, and then after killing them, they have chopped the bodies, they have set them on fire. It's it's something that I had not even heard in my life happening in Iran.
Mm,
And it's very difficult to process. We know that I mean, Mossad has bragged about how they've been walking behind the protesters on the streets. Pompeo has been saying that. Even back in 2022, during the so-called Women Life Freedom protests, Bolton, in an interview with BBC, bragged about how they managed to deliver arms to the protesters this time. I mean, you have seen what the police in the US, for example, does to
yep. The
immigrants or
ICE agents.
passerbys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not even protesters, and they just get killed. And then you get um, famous American influencers who are even who claim to oppose Trump, saying that's what they deserve because they got on the way of the police. But
Mm,
suddenly, when it comes to Iran, the scenario changes, and everyone expects the police not to do anything and just probably hand out flowers to the heavily armed protesters that have been and snipers. Like you have snipers from the buildings shooting people.
yeah.
A lot of people have been shot in the forehead. A lot of people have been stabbed or shot from behind just walking. Like there is this very successful lawyer in Esfahan who was stabbed from behind, and of course, Iran International claims that he was killed by security forces, but the family have talked and they said how it's been very, you know, it's one thing mourning the death of your loved one, and it's another thing having to deal with the propaganda that tries to even
Mm,
attack your family and make up a story from what has, like, there's this very famous or sort of famous girl on Instagram. She was famous for riding motorcycles and the way she does her makeup and everything. And she died. Unfortunately, she died in an accident while getting after recording and getting on her motorcycle. And they are saying that she died in the protest and the family has spoken out, and they have said that no, please stop that. We're mourning. Our daughter died in a motor accident, and please stop spreading these rumors. There are people who have not even died; they're alive, and their pictures are being circulated online as I don't know, being killed by the government. And I'm not saying the government hasn't killed anyone. I mean, when there you have
yeah.
armed protesters, in quotations, of course that's what happened, and it's very sad. It's very unfortunate. It's the images that we're seeing from the morgues, I mean, all these precious lives that have been lost. Some of them were just protesting. Some of them were not even protesting. They were just doing their, ordinary things, everyday life things, and it's very sad. And there is, I mean, even one precious life being lost is too much.
Mm,
But seeing that they are faking these numbers for different purposes is, yeah, it's outrageous. Because as you know, the purpose is one, to justify a military invasion. We remember the Nayara story of Kuwait, the incubators and everything, which turned out to be um, just a made up story to justify the invasion of Iraq. Not that the US actually cares about, you
no.
know, those lives, but they always have to make up a story so the world would accept the invasion
Mm,
of an independent nation. But it's also, I think, part of the project is to make people forget about what happened in Gaza. We
yeah.
watched a live streamed genocide for 2 years, and Israel
Mm,
bombarding all every possible location, house, mosque, schools, hospitals in Gaza. And after 2 years, they're finally admitting that at least 60,000 or 70,000
yeah.
innocent
It's
people
way
have been
more. Yeah.
killed. exactly. I mean, when they say it's 60,000, the numbers are
It's
much
I
higher,
think it's yeah, I
much
think it's
higher.
around at least 500,000 by now. You know, and that's without all
Exactly.
the people that are now dying in the winter conditions, living in tents that
Exactly.
are still being bombed and attacked and sniped and shelled, and the lack of humanitarian aid that's being allowed in. And in fact, all that is being allowed in is food that ultimately is going to kill them anyway. High sugar, absolutely no nutritional value, etc.
Nutrition.
So the
Exactly.
genocide is ongoing. It just became, I
That's
won't
true.
even say a trickle genocide, but it's a genocide now that people are almost switching off from because of the
Exactly.
manipulation through the Trump so-called peace scam, as I call it. And then the pivot to Venezuela, to Central Africa, to Somaliland, to Sudan.
Yeah.
Everything is a diversionary tactic away from what is continuing to happen in Gaza, as you said. And of course, Iran is perceived very much by the West and even by the resistance axis as kind of the head of that axis. You know, we've lost
Exactly.
parts of the spine. The spine has been broken with the fall of Syria, with the assassination of Said Hassan,
Nasrallah. Yes.
and leaders of Hamas. Iraq now is under huge pressure to disarm the resistance factions. ISIS is being released into Iraq to, of course,
Exactly.
challenge the resistance there. And now, when you talk about the killings, all it reminds me of immediately are the early days in Syria. And I remember talking to members of the real Syria civil defense in Latakia, for example, who told me, they said, Vanessa, we didn't even recognize these people. They were not Syrian. Like, how will
Exactly.
Syrians come out on the street and stab other Syrians and the fire brigade were there to keep peace. They were being sniped and stabbed to the
Exactly.
point where they had to flee to their own control center where they were basically besieged for 3 or 4 days at that time. So it reminds me so much of that and that confusion over like, why would Iranians do this to other Iranians? Do you actually think, because so many of the rioters that we saw on the news and in the media were masked, do you think they were not Iranian? Is there a possibility that these are elements that were brought in from outside, or are they elements
Mhm.
that have been radicalized over time to be triggered at a certain point against their neighbors, just as happened in Syria?
And unfortunately, I think it's the second scenario. The
Mm,
propaganda, the radicalization has happened. There might be elements or some people among them who are not Iranian, but I would say the majority are Iranians who sold their souls and their country and their countrymen
mm,
to Mossad in Israel. During the 12-day war, they cooperated with Israel, and there's this. I just today I saw this interview with a young man who has now escaped to the occupied territories, I guess, and he was explaining how he would assemble different pieces to prepare, and he would acted basically as Israel's eyes during the 12-day war. He was Iranian, but he worked for Israel. I mean, by identification documents, he is Iranian. I don't want to call him
mm,
an Iranian, um, but he considers him an Iranian, and that's the very traumatizing and sad part because we had the
yeah.
bombings of the pilgrimage for
Mm,
the anniversary of General Qasem Soleimani, and most of the attackers were not even Iranian or different incidents that we had, but this time, it looks like most of them are Iranians who worked as agents for Mossad and CIA. And I'm sure there are elements among them who were not even paid, just brainwashed. Uh, the brainwashed part are not the ones that can. or would be able to carry the very violent killing spree, but
mm,
helping uh, and allowing that to happen. Because, as I said, the propaganda in demonizing and creating hatred towards security forces, toward the police officers, but also towards people who just look different. There was this guy, I think in Tehran, who was stabbed, and he said, "I just didn't have anything to do with what was going on. Only because I had a beard, they just started attacking me." So this is what is happening, and that's what really scares me, because we, by now, everyone knows, and the American leaders have admitted that the purpose of the sanctions is to create such economic the conditions that strangulate the people, and people will see no option but to revolt against their own governments, because they will start blaming the government. And I'm not saying the government doesn't have a role, that the government definitely has a role in the economic mismanagement, but a big part of it is because
yeah.
Iran cannot have access to its own money. Iran has money in
Mm.
different banks, and in different countries, and it cannot access them. Iran cannot sell its oil. Iran,
Mm.
like, they have tried everything to isolate us, to make it impossible for the country to basically survive. But despite all of that, we have managed to not only survive, but also, like, some of the sectors in the country have thrived. I mean, you have visited Iran. It does not really look
Mm.
like a country under sanctions when you walk around.
No.
We really have a lot of resources. We have intellectuals who have a passion for protecting their country. We have tried to develop our like, to supply our own needs and demands inside the country. But at the end of the day, like any other country, we need to trade with other countries. We need to sell our resources in order to be able to have a revenue. And for example, the value of rial collapsing against dollar, one main reason is that because Iran cannot get foreign currencies inside the country, because we're
Mm.
trying to sell our oil, but we don't really get actual paper currency in return for it. We have resorted to barter trade with some countries, for example, with China, previously with India, and that pressures the government, pressures the economy a lot in different ways. And so this is what the plan has been, to by means of sanctions, to create economic stress and pressure
Yeah.
over time, and then by means of propaganda to radicalize the society. Of course, a lot of people still don't buy into it. I have, like, inside families and circle of friends, you talk to people with very different ideas about, for example, how the government should handle the protesters, how the government should
Mm.
manage the economy and everything. But at the end of the day, we're friends, we're family members, we're Iranians, right? But then there is a part of the society, especially the younger generation, that, like the younger generation everywhere in the world, are the TikTok generation, the Instagram
Mm.
generation, and they do not they do not even have time to process one emotion. Like, it's
Yeah.
like just scrolling and getting bombarded with various emotion that creates hatred and violence in them, and so they become very aggressive towards other uh, Iranians, other members of the society.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the roles of social media, and we know now that basically all of the cyber information is controlled and regulated in favor of the Zionist entity and of the CIA, MI6, whichever agency that is of the imperialist bloc. And so therefore that, I see it, you see it, you mentioned on X, and I saw you come under attack, for example, for saying that anyone visiting Iran should respect the culture. Just as, there are protests all the time right now in the UK that are against immigration, that are saying, protecting, in their words, like I see it as dangerous white nationalism or white supremacism, but saying that, their culture should be protected at all costs. And yet somehow people expect Iranians to effectively surrender their culture in favor
Exactly.
of appeasing opinions in the West. I mean, I'd like you to comment on that because I know that I was actually shocked to see the amount of simply because you are someone who was visiting Iran to respect your culture, to let's say accept the culture, to you're in this country, so you
Exactly.
effectively. I was challenged in the same way by opposition to the government, even when I was in Tehran, because I covered my head. And by the way, people, you don't have to, completely veil up as Western media tells you. It's literally just a scarf over your head. If it falls off, nobody's going to come out and kind of arrest you on the
Exactly.
spot. But someone actually said to me, an Iranian person actually said to me when we'd gone out for dinner in Tehran, and they said, but you're a hypocrite. You're from the West and you're coming to Iran and you're covering your head, like this. And it was an interesting argument. But I'm like,
Yeah,
listen, if this is the culture of this country, I respect it. I also respect your
exactly.
point of view. You're Iranian. You have the right to your point of view also. But me personally, in many Christian churches, they ask you to cover your head when you enter the
Exactly.
church to pray. It's not something that we should. Why is there so much disrespect of Iranian culture, even among those who are, supposedly in support of Iran? And I was
Exactly.
just shocked by the amount of venom really in the responses to you because you were asking very politely for someone to actually respect the culture inside Iran. If you're going to support Iran and you're in Iran, at least, integrate yourself for the time that you're
Exactly.
there into the culture. So I'd like you to talk about that because there is this weird dynamic going on where I see people all the time saying, yeah, I support Iran, against the imperialist Axis, but
And
you know what I
they should
mean?
allow women to practice
Yeah.
whatever they want.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's a very important uh, topic to address, but it's also very sensitive because a lot of people have very strong opinions about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important to talk about it. And I think it's not about what cultural practice it is, it's about having a country practicing its own culture and wanting to practice it that way. That cultural practice may be wrong in someone else's view, maybe even in the view of a part of the society inside like Iran or any country, given
Mm-hmm.
country. But whenever there is a protest to a wrong law or a wrong cultural
Mm.
practice, to the indigenous people of that country to do it. So, for example, if I see an Iranian as a form of civil disobedience, wanting to show that they disagree with a certain law, posting their pictures like disobeying the law, well, that's their rights. They have the rights to show that they don't like it. But for someone from outside, you're not here. It's like I go to America on a tourist visa and start protesting ICE. I don't have any
Mm.
agency there. I have to respect the law when I'm a visitor there. And it becomes even more important, I think, if you are invited by the government of Iran, if you are attending some, I don't know, like formal events, like if you're a tourist, it's probably more relaxed in the society. And as you said, no one cares. Like even now,
Mm.
especially after, I mean, over these past few years, I have students that remove their headscarves in the classroom and nobody cares, like on
Mm.
those streets also. But they are Iranians, so they have the right to
Yeah.
object the law. But my problem is, why should anyone else from outside Iran tell us what's right to do? we know, we have our agency. We know what is right for us and what is wrong. There are different parts of the society. We always have debates over it, like what is good, what is bad, how to deal with that. We don't need foreigners to tell us. And it really, I find it really insulting in matters of cultural efforts or political efforts. Yes, of course, a lot of, I mean, people can have different opinions. They can tell us or talk about their opinions. Like
Mm,
maybe I would say like I think Venezuela should do this or should do that, but
mm,
why? I mean, I'm not a Venezuelan. I'm not going to push anyone or tell anyone in Venezuela what is better for them. I will tell,
exactly.
I think this is going to help, for example, Venezuela, but I won't push any Venezuelan to do anything because they are intellectual peoples. They know what is better for their country. If something seems wrong to me, it's my opinion. I
Mm,
cannot impose that opinion on anybody else. And the thing that, especially when it comes to cultural affairs, the thing that it does is like, if you're not, practicing or dressing like me, then your lives don't matter to me. That's the vibe that I get from a lot of these comments. So because you're objecting the removing of like a headscarf in like public places, then I don't care what happens to your country because this is different from what I practice in the
yeah.
US. And that's very problematic. It's exactly the imperialist narrative. I always have given this example before, and I would like to repeat that. Just look at how the US weaponized the issue of the headscarf against Iran. If you
Hmm.
are doing this, if you are in a more maybe subtle way saying that this is problematic, that people shouldn't be doing this or doing that in Iran, then you're just playing this by
Mm,
the same playbook. You're not different. You're just using kind, or I mean, maybe kinder words, but it's at the end of the day, it's the same project. I remember some of this very famous, a famous group of famous U.S. activists visiting my faculty back when I was a student, and they have done good things against war and against sanctions. But there was this meeting in my faculty, and this lady started saying that obviously she was anti-war and anti-sanctions, but she said, "But you should allow women to dress the way they want." And I just rose my hand to say, we know what you would do, what we should do. I think uh, for you outside Iran, if you can do anything, it's to get your governments to lift the sanctions on us.
mm,
That's what you can. That's your job, right? You're not going to tell us how to dress, how to
yeah.
organize our societies. If we need advice, we'll come to you and we'll ask you. But we're not waiting for that. We know what we should do. The same issue. I mean, when it comes to culture at first, it's more. I think the attack is more obvious, but sometimes when it comes to the issue of the nuclear bombs, I hear a lot of people saying Iran should develop nuclear bombs, and I understand where it comes from, and I understand that. I don't really have a strong opinion whether Iran should or shouldn't, because
Mm,
I think our politicians and our scientists know it very well. They are the ones who have been resisting imperialist power. They are the ones who defended this country during the 12-Day War. They are the ones who have managed to keep this country up together in over almost 50 years, despite sanctions, terrorist attacks, assassinations,
hmm.
threats of wars, and everything. So I'm sure they definitely know more than me what is better to do for the country. So yes, it's good to, of course, people should say what their opinion is, but no one is allowed to, or no one should push for any policy, push for any cultural practice, because that um, takes the agency and the voice from Iranians away. It's like we're a passive nation sitting idle and we're just waiting for others to tell
Yeah.
us what is better for us to do. And I really hate that. It's I find it very insulting. And I see it as not different from the entire imperialist narrative that seeks to control us and control and subjugate the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, just on the question of sanctions, because in another sense, also, there's two things I wanted to touch on, because I remember us talking about the water situation when I was with you in Isfahan. And so, first of all, to talk about that and whether there is a possibility that even that is being engineered to a degree, like, for example, the drought in Syria, I think in 2009. And there are a number of reports, including by the Red Cross, that are talking about the fact that Turkey was among those engineering the drought in order to create the societal upheaval and the pushing of the agricultural communities into the suburbs, where then it was much easier to contain them, to radicalize them, to prepare for the regime change war that began in 2011. So that's number one. Number two is when you talk about the sanctions and the sale of resources, and of course also I would assume even if China and Russia, for example, are buying resources, they're buying at a better price from their perspective than they would be if Iran were trading in a normal scenario. I'm assuming that's correct because, any country would benefit from a perceived weakness of a country under sanctions in order to benefit economically from buying the resources at a better price than normal, because we definitely saw China doing that in Yemen, buying Yemeni oil through the Saudi proxy regime in the south, etc. So there is a benefit for the countries that are still trading with Iran that are part of BRICS. That's number one. But also the fact that effectively what they're doing is they're saying you can't develop civilian nuclear energy to effectively sustain the Iranian population. So again, that's another measure which is designed to reduce the living quality, the quality of life for Iranians.
That's true. With regard to the first question, in terms of whether the water crisis is engineered, I don't have data, so I can't really talk. This is not my area of specialty, and I don't have data. But yes, there are reports on how it seems engineered because, for example, on the borders with, for example, Turkey, you see the two sides of one mountain, one like the same mountain, like one side is covered in snow, the other side is not. So the discussions are around those things. Like I haven't seen any scientific output that really argues that in a strong way. But we know the history of Israel and also, and as you said, Israel has stolen water from Lebanon, from Palestine, and they have engineered
Syria.
climate. Syria also climates in different places. But even before the revolution, the Pahlavi dictator employed Israeli specialists to get advice on how to manage the water resources.
Interesting.
And one advice was to close the qanats. Qanats were underground systems that managed the underground water. It was a very sophisticated system developed by Iranians and have been running for thousands of years. And that's how, for example, in the deserts and small villages, they manage their water resources. So this so-called advisor advised the Iranian dictatorship to close all those qanats and instead dig wells. So that's one of the things that in over many years have led to to the drying out of the underground water resources. There are, for example, in Esfahan, because the water shortage has always been there. It's not a new thing. It's, for example, Esfahan or other cities have always, during various periods of time have gone through water shortage, but they knew how to manage it. They knew how to survive. But the amount that we're seeing now is partially, obviously, because of some very mistaken policies that the governments have taken over the years, and we're now seeing the results. But it's I would say, I think a part of it is has been engineered. Um, I mean, how exactly this has happened, I don't know. As I told you, I think
Mm,
one of the main reasons is the drying out of the underground water resources that could have been prevented, or could have been at least you know, stopped at some point, but it wasn't.
mm,
The digging of the walls in many places never stopped, and it was very unregulated, and that has helped create the problem that we are having now. But as you said, the nuclear energy could help us with, for example, the production of power, electricity power in the cities, and
yeah.
that's what we're constantly threatened by, like, being attacked for that. And that would solve a big a part of the problem that we have, because this year or the previous year also we had electricity shortage, which we never had before. This is
Yeah.
like the first time we're dealing with that, um, and I mean, the nuclear power could replace part of it and facilitate the supply of energy to Iranian houses. There are many different ways, and the government is considering the many different ways to tackle that problem. But
Mm,
I think it's a part of it is a manufactured crisis with the history of we have seen with Israel, and I think there are elements within the Iranian society or Iranian mafia that help that happen,
yeah.
appearing as a form of advisor, but giving very wrong advice that actually leads to more crisis in that area. Um, what was the second question? You have to remind me.
No, it was basically, the fact that on top of the sanctions, any ability
Mhm.
for Iran to produce alternatives to
Yes,
electricity, which can be easily destroyed. The infrastructure can be relatively easily destroyed, as it was, I think, during the 12-day war and even during the riots, because again, Iranian
exactly.
indigenous protests are not going to go and destroy medical centers and bus stations and essential
Firefighting
infrastructure.
stations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and mosques,
Hospitals.
places of worship, this
Yeah.
if people are actually thinking rationally, this doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
And we see this. I remember seeing it in France during the Yellow Vest movement, where the government was obviously dispatching agents provocateurs to
Mm,
smash glasses, set fire to cars, and so on. And this isn't in the interests of genuine protests or genuine labor
exactly.
movements at all, because you're actually destroying the economy. If we're talking about an economic protest or strike, then you're destroying that
Exactly.
economy, right? So that doesn't make any sense to me either. And
Exactly.
sorry, I just wanted to come back to the morgues because this is an important point for me, because
Mhm.
the BBC and CNN, and the BBC in particular, I mean, I reported on this BBC Verify, which is supposed to be actually tackling fake news, were saying that they had seen footage of the morgues. Um, Channel 4, Kathy Newman, who's one of my, let's say, least favorite journalists on the planet, interviewing Sayed Mohammed Marandi, was telling him, we've seen the bodies on the street. And when he corrected her, she said, well, I mean in the morgue. So these morgue
Exactly.
images, which I think Emily Schrader was exposed for having AI'd the image of the bodies in body bags and making them look much more numerous than they were. But
Yeah.
let's just talk about that, because presumably those were the bodies of the people killed by the rioters, and their families going to identify them. But of course, the BBC, Channel 4, CNN, all of these criminal organizations pushing regime change were saying, oh, you know, these are the morgues and the mass killings by the security forces
Exactly.
and so on. So I think I just want to just quickly cover that one again because I think it's very important for
Sure.
people to get this from you.
Yeah. So yes, the pictures that were going on, there was one picture that in the Farsi social media, of course,
Mm,
also operated by Mossad and CIA, was going viral, and there was then like a number tag on one of the body bags, which was
mm,
like I don't remember the exact number, but it was probably 11,000 or 12,000 some. I think 11,000 something. And then people were saying that, oh, see, in 2 days they have killed 11,000 people. When in fact, and they got the head of the forensic to talk about it
mm,
on TV, and they showed all the documents from the beginning of the Persian New Year. The Persian New Year started from the 21st of March. So not everyone that comes to the morgue goes for the forensic and autopsy because I mean people who have died of natural causes don't need that, and they come from hospitals and they directly are going to get prepared for the burial. But the bodies that need autopsy and like a forensic analysis go to this particular section, and he was explaining that they put tag numbers from the beginning of the Persian year to the end, and normally during a year about 15,000 bodies are referred to the forensics in Tehran. So the number that you were seeing was in the 10th month of the Persian calendar. So
right.
11,000 had started. It was like after 10 months, it was the 11,000th body that was referred to forensic, and that's how the rumor started. And then the numbers, for some reason, it's like magically overnight are doubled and doubled. The government has said that more than 3,000 people have
Yeah.
been killed, and out of these 3,000, about 600 were the rioters. So the government is saying that these are the people that were killed by the government because they were armed and they were killing other
Mm,
people. And I'm sure there were innocent people who were killed. I mean, by innocent people, I'm saying like passerbys or probably
yeah, yeah.
protesters who were accompanied by, I mean, there were when the rioters hijacked and the police had to start to like open fire. There were people who died there, but especially the first nights, the police were not, or security forces were not even allowed to open fire on the armed
Mm-mm.
protesters. And that's, as I said, how so many security forces have been killed in cold blood. And then the numbers, there's this Iranian German eye doctor who in one interview just made up this number that there have been 30,000 people, and I know, and he lives in Germany. He hasn't been to Iran for I don't know how many decades, and he claimed that this is the actual number. And then, of course, all these other outlets picked up on that. There was this
Yeah.
piece by Time, which said that Time said that we have talked to two senior medical officials in Iran without saying who. Of course, always
Mm-hmm.
there are like anonymous people inside Iran that give them information, and we never know about them. And then, in the footnotes, Time says Time cannot verify these figures. Of course, you cannot because you made them up, and we have
Yeah.
seen that happen a lot during whatever protest happens or whatever happens in Iran. That's the pattern. There are fake
Mm,
numbers appearing all of a sudden, and then there are two
yeah.
senior officials who didn't want their names to be revealed, and then Times or Guardians, BBC or CNN cannot verify these figures, but they are spread, and then based on that, the narrative of to justify an invasion, a full invasion of Iran, is put out.
Hmm.
I remember during the 2022 protests, there was this like meticulous, like full report by CNN about a girl that was in prison and his nail was pulled out and his head was shaved and he was, attacked and raped. And two people, again, anonymous people inside Iran, have told CNN that this is what happened. And like a few days later, this lady comes out, her hair the same length, the same dye, and cut the same color. Her nails very long and
Fine.
nail polish like
Uh,
before. And she's free. So obviously, when that was like probably everything else that they're making us either exaggerated or lied to. So, and when it comes to Iran, you have to be very careful with all the figures that you're saying.
mhm.
Okay, if you don't want to believe the official numbers, okay, it's up to you. But do not believe the numbers that the outlet that put them out
Yeah, yeah.
cannot verify, and that has no source to refer to in
Mm.
order to cite them. And as I said, I think it's very important. There are two things that are being used in order to justify an attack. One, that there is no normal life left in Iran. Like everyone is devastated, everyone has lost families, everyone, like, the shops are not working. But I'm telling you, if you come to Iran, you will see cafes and restaurants working, schools, I don't know, hospitals, the streets are. Last night I had a meeting and it took me a long time in the traffic to get to, the normal Tehran traffic, which is
Normal
like really
life.
crazy. Yeah, so normal life is going on. So please do not use that as an excuse to attack us. We are having a normal life, even though it's very stressful. It's under
Mm.
pressure. It's not normal the way uh, those who are living in Europe and the US without any attacks are doing, but it's normal in many other ways. And we enjoy life. We don't want to be killed. Please do not think of liberating us. And the second thing is that those
Mm.
numbers, you are increasing the numbers without any sources, because you want to justify again an invasion of Iran and say that, oh, so if this number of people have been killed, so it's okay to invade and kill as many people in order to liberate them. They will be happy. But no, we don't need the liberation. And no, that's not the right number of the people who have been killed.
Yeah, and I think the other thing which is very important to point out is that all of these people, as you said, who are producing these figures are outside Iran. Like even a lot
Exactly.
of the BBC, CNN were citing, what was it? HRANA, which is the human rights activists of Iran.
And
So people assume they're in Iran, and then the human rights activists news agency, which was the
yes,
organization that was being cited. No, they're actually based very close to the CIA headquarters.
exactly.
They're in Fairfax, Virginia. They're funded by the NED, the National Endowment
Foundation.
Agency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Um, there is an outreach agent of the CIA. So again, this is just textbook blueprint that actually began
Exactly.
back in Yugoslavia and has been rolled out ever since in Syria, Iraq, Libya, even in Lebanon to some degree. But anyway, across the board. And so I
Yes,
think, people need to keep that historical context and that suspicion of what they're being told by reporters
exactly.
from the BBC, CNN, who are not inside Iran. This is another
Yeah,
thing I love. I
exactly.
saw, who was it? Hugo Beshaiga, standing with this footage of riots behind him. I'm like, of course he's not in Iran, but the impression given is that he is in Iran and he's witnessing
Yes,
all of this. So I think people are suspending belief in these organizations after their historical role in
exactly.
multiple regime change and destabilization projects that are never for the benefit, whether it's Afghanistan or Syria, it's never for the benefit of the people of
Yeah,
that country. Look at Syria to understand that the massacres, the ethnic cleansing, the poverty, the deprivation that still exists. Nothing has changed for the Syrian people except for the worse, right?
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
won't. It's
I
not
mean,
going to.
yeah. There are always native informants like Iranian diaspora, Iranian opposition, so-called
Yeah.
opposition, who push for sanctions, for designation of, for example, IRGC as a terrorist
Mm.
organization, or um, a full invasion of Iran. But they're sitting in their couches and getting paid by CIA or VOA, or I don't know, some other American
Yeah.
organizations in their comfort. And I'm telling you, even if the Islamic Republic collapses, and there is like, of course, that then the country will be balkanized, I think. But and there is like an, I don't know, Pahlavi takeover or whatever. They're not going to leave their comfortable
Yeah,
couches
exactly.
in the US
Yeah.
or in Europe and come back to Iran. They're just doing that for because they're paid to do that. It's not that they
Mm.
care about Iran, and they have, as I said, they are the native informants. They have bought into this white savior mode, and they think they are also white because they have become part of
Mm.
the American society or the white society, and they think that they don't want to live in a third world no matter what. And I'm sure after that they will start criticizing the Iranian people for not having the proper culture. Oh, this is not working on you because you're not civilized enough. That's exactly the rhetoric
Yeah.
that you see from Iranian opposition, and they're always attacking Arabs, attacking Turks, attacking anyone who's not white, because they crave acceptance by the white savior, white people, and the white establishment that rules over these countries. And this is, and that's why they are so unhinged. They're so disgraceful. They are, and
Mm.
of course, there are, arguments and quarrels among them, because one says, no, the Rajavis and the MEK should come back. The other one says Pahlavi should come back. Someone
Yeah.
else doesn't even know who should come back. They just do this for the society.
Uh,
Uh, and that's the scary future that would happen after the collapse, or
yeah.
hopefully never happen. But that's the scenario for the country.
Well, exactly. I mean, how many Syrians in the EU, the UK, or the US want to go back to Syria right
Exactly.
now? In fact, I think the EU and the UK now are talking about forced deportations, and the US, of course. So, I think
I
that
mean, they did.
Syria
Yeah,
is such a lesson in
exactly.
understanding the power of propaganda and how destructive it actually is for the people
Yeah,
of that country, where they effectively have to be forced to go back to the country, even though from outside, many of them were calling for regime change, sanctions,
exactly.
no-fly zones, everything to punish the people that were actually living in the country that they deserted anyway. They
Bearing the
abandoned it.
consequences. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
I mean, just as we're like when these protests were happening and Trump and Pompeo were supporting the protesters, Trump deported Iranians, like Iranians from the
Yeah.
U.S. So if I mean, that's what Trump wants to do. And a number of them arrived exactly during like and after the days of the protests. So if the Iranian government is actually killing people and Trump really cares about these Iranian people, why is he deporting them to the country even before there is a regime change implanted?
Mm,
And I think it's very difficult for me to see how there are still people who think that America can liberate them. America cannot figure out what to do with its own people and with its own society. We're just seeing the
exactly.
images coming from, and it's very difficult conditions in the U.S. right now too. I mean, a lot of I feel for the American citizens too, having to deal with this crazy president and uh,
Mm,
the the radicalization of the society too. So I think if America can actually do something, they need to figure out how to deal or how to deal with this president or how to solve their own problems.
exactly. I think my last question would just be, I know that the foreign minister of Iran is currently in Turkey. I don't have very high regard for Turkey in international affairs because You know, it's such a traitorous regime when we see
It's
what
very
happened in
hypocritical.
Syria. Yeah. And even when it's calling for an end to the genocide and it's apparently criticizing Israel, it's still allowing the supply of oil to Israel and so on, you know. So, what I'm slightly concerned about, I mean, I'm seeing statements from Hakan Fidan, the Turkish foreign minister. I'm
Mhm.
also seeing Abbas Arakci speaking and President Pezeshkian, and there seems to be this kind of slight movement towards, well, maybe we can still negotiate over the nuclear deal, and Turkey is pushing allegedly Trump to break down the negotiations into four parts with Iran and so on. My fear is, are we seeing exactly what we saw leading up to the 12-day war, where there is this kind of pretense of negotiation and talking to the US while the US is building up, as Trump calls it, this big armada, or the biggest armada ever, as I'm sure he'll
Armada.
probably
Yeah.
say. Um, what's your feeling basically? There's so much information from open source intelligence on social media, and everyone's kind of commenting and getting, very excitable, I guess, about the
Yeah.
prospect of war. Here, living in this region, we talked just before we started talking on interview, you know, here there's a lot of anxiety also because obviously from the perspective of this region, it's already so battered after decades of war of attrition with the entire Zionist bloc, including the US, UK, EU, Turkey, Gulf states, and so on. Um, there is a level of anxiety over the fate of Iran because obviously
Yes.
if Iran is in any way destabilized to the point of collapse, then people need to understand whatever you think about Iran, the entire region is going to be impacted in a
Exactly.
catastrophic, devastating way. And then after this region, it's not going to end here. It's going to also spread into the rest of the world. We've already seen it
Yeah.
escalating in Central Africa, in the Horn of Africa. Even as you said, in the US, we're seeing ICE agents trained by the IOF executing American people, civilian
Yes.
citizens, on the streets of Minneapolis, for example.
Exactly.
Venezuela, Cuba is now under siege. Mexico and Venezuela have been prevented sending oil to Cuba. It only has, according to some reports, 10 to 15 days before it's completely out of energy resources, right? So I guess, yeah, I guess my fear is the government under President Pezeshkian being pushed towards again this negotiating position while America and Israel are building up an aggression against Iran.
Well, what I can say is I hope not, because and from the rhetoric, because in the previous rounds of indirect talks
Mm,
with Oman intermediating, um,
mm,
public opinion, or at least part of the public opinion inside Iran, wanted the negotiations, even though they found that this is, against our national dignity and everything, but we didn't want to get into the war. But
mm,
when it happened while we were engaging in the negotiations right now, I mean, the people that I have talked to, from students, from I don't know, like colleagues on the streets, everyone is like, what are the negotiations going to do for us? They're not going to help us. So that demand from the public, I don't see it
right.
exist anymore. So I'm hoping that's also the what the government is understanding. Based on the rhetoric that comes from the government, it looks like they have made it clear that so far the US does not want negotiations. Yes, if it was actually about negotiations, we would consider it, but it's not about negotiations. You have proven that before. And the rhetoric also coming from the military forces is that
Yeah.
we're ready. They're going to also have this drill in the Strait of Hormuz,
Yes.
which is going to I think that's very significant. So I think um, It's more about regional countries, including Turkey, being worried about the consequences of the collapse
Yeah.
of Iranian government. So that because that's going to affect Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, as you said, the entire region,
UAE.
and it's going
Yeah.
to, yeah, UAE, and it's going to go further. It's not going to stay there. So
Mm.
I think some, I mean, our foreign minister has also said that he has received a lot of calls from other countries in the region in order
Mm.
to like step up for peace or for negotiations, and none of them have been Europeans, obviously, which I think it's because they are worried what will happen
Worried.
to them
Yeah,
if,
yeah.
yeah, if the Iranian government collapses. But from inside Iran, yes, we're also anxious. We're watching, scrolling the news. This morning, I woke up with what I think was probably a military aerial drill or something because it was like very loud, sounded like fighter jets, very loud. And I woke up, checked out from the window. Everything was calm. So I don't know what exactly it was, but I know that they have been having drills. So it's kind of have become normal. But it's a war that going to be very it's going to determine the future of the entire world, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be only between Iran and the US or Iran and Israel.
Hmm.
It's going to be the third world war, if we're not, I mean, we're already into it, but it's going to be more obvious. And even though, as much as I don't want it to happen, I don't want a war, I don't want my country to get destroyed. But if that's going to bring an end to the aggressions by Zionist entity and the US, we're ready to confront them. But obviously, it's going to be a very difficult battle. It's not going to be easy. At this point, um, I think Trump likes to bluff a lot, and they say barking dogs seldom
Yeah.
bite. To save face, he might have some limited operation somewhere. I don't think it's going to be uh, a big war yet, but at
Mm.
some point it will happen.
Yeah. Well, Setareh, I hope, thank you, because you always bring such common sense and humanity and just, a simple objectivity, based on being in the country that you clearly love so much, and the people, and among the people that you love so much. And I think it's so important for people to get that empathy and understanding with Iran and stop being redirected or diverted or distracted by the ridiculous propaganda. I mean, we were so used to it. Or me, I'm not Syrian, but living in Syria, you became very used to it. But nevertheless, it's destructive. And it's very insulting towards, a culture which honestly is way older and has far greater civilizational richness to it than many of the Western cultures. And I think, we need to sometimes remind ourselves of that. And you're the perfect example to bring us to our senses, I think, on that from that perspective. So thank you for talking to me today. And I hope we can talk again in the next few weeks as things obviously are going to develop. I mean, everything is accelerating so fast. We thought we would have a break in 2026, but it
Yeah,
just, it kicked off with the kidnapping of President Maduro and then just
yeah,
everything else. It just hasn't stopped.
yeah.
So thank you. And please give my
Thank you.
best regards to all your family, to the people there, because, I, I feel very strongly that Iran is really representing what the world should be, which is a level of humanity and morality and standing by principles and your integrity, the same as Yemen. And I think
Exactly. I love Yemen.
we in the West have a lot to learn from those kind of countries, and there are not many left. that do actually stand by moral principles and belief and ideology and the equality for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa, for having me, and thank you for caring about telling the truth, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how they try to silence the truth, but you keep fighting. And I feel very flattered receiving those comments from you. Just doing what I can and what I think is right for my country. I love Iran. I love the people. I love the culture. I love everything here. I've been born and raised here. I've lived all of my life here. And I'm saying that because sometimes in the comments, people start saying that, no, she has never lived in Iran, which I don't know where it comes from, but I have always lived here. I've never lived in any other country. This is where I belong to. And I want to protect, and I hope what's best will happen to the people of Iran and the people of the world. I still have hope in the people and Palestinians and Yemenis and Lebanese and Iranians. And I think coming from this ideology in Islam where you keep your morals, and Sayyid Hassan has talked about it very well, in that we're either going to be we're either going to win or we'll be martyred. And for us, both of them are victory, because we're not going to compromise our values. We're not going to compromise our dignity. What's important for us is to stay true to our values, human values. And that's what is the most important thing.
Thank you, Setareh. Please take care.
Thank you, you too.